everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Abundant Life News. I'm Ami Burrow. So today I'm going to be talking to you all about a couple of different things, one of which happens to be focusing on faithfulness and what it means to be faithful. I do want to talk to you about that because it's been something that has been definitely on my heart to talk about for quite some time. And today I'm just going to talk to you all. I am going to have some highlights in here from some news pegs, but I want to really just talk to you all. First and foremost, I want to have a moment of transparency. I never thought that I would ever be the type of person to be a YouTuber, quote unquote, someone that would get online and just have conversations and to tell everybody about what they think and give their opinion. That has never been something that I have sought after, that I was like, oh, this is what I want to do with my life. But how many know that your plans are not your plans? And that your plans are God's plans, and he always gets what he wants. And by design, everything that he has in store for us is way better than our plans to begin with. So even if it's hard for us to fathom or think about what it is that we're supposed to be doing in life, right? It's only to satisfy the King. So what you do for Christ will last, and everything else will obviously perish away. And so it's important for us to be obedient, but also not only to be obedient, but to want to seek God in a different way, that we're closer to him so that we can hear his voice, hear his word. The day that we hear his voice, that we harden not our heart. And so I just really have to give some credit, some big ups to Lala, your girl Lala Jenkins. Okay, I'm going to put her link in here. This video took me straight out. I'm going to, first of all, let you all just take some time to go and search that video. The link is there, and just so we can kind of talk about it with some highlights. But the video was really, really serious. She talked about being obedient to God, hearing his voice, but also too, she talked about the story of Saul and how Saul, when, he was supposed to be coming back and he was supposed to kill, right, everything in the land, because God told him to kill everything and everyone. Don't spare a sheep, don't spare oxen, don't spare anything. And that was his assignment, and he didn't fulfill his assignment, and thus he was considered disobedient. So, the phrase that we hear all the time, obedience is better than sacrifice. Yeah, it came from that passage in regards to Saul and him being disobedient. When God told him to do something specifically, he sent a man of God to him to let him know, look, you weren't supposed to do that. You were supposed to do what God told you to do and slay everything that's there, and don't bring back any of the spoils. But he blamed it on the people ultimately. But I'll let you all take a listen on your own. But it was deep, okay? And it was real deep, okay? And to the point where it was like, what is it that God has for you to do? What are you supposed to be doing that you have not done? How many of us have did things in our own way and wanted God to bless it, okay? You been there? Or how many of us have done things and it wasn't exactly what God has for us to do? And so we have to humble ourselves. And humbling ourselves, I used to think that humility and humbling yourself was necessarily like a bad thing, or it shows a sense of weakness, because that's what it basically means when it comes to the natural terms. But when you think about humility and being humble to God, that's the focus. A lot of times people believe that it's to men, and it's to God, and having that relationship with him, to hear his voice, and not only to hear his voice, to be a hearer of the word, but be a doer of the word, and do the things that he's asking for us to do, so that we are not disobedient in our call or in whatever it is that he has designed for us to do. So long story short, I watched the video, touched my heart. Girl, you're not out here alone, Lala. I'm out here in these YouTube streets. I don't know, I'm here. So I'm just grateful to be here. Again, my name is Ami Burrow, and I am the host of Abundant Life News. You can feel free to check out some of the previous episodes, where they were really focused on hard news stories and a few just localized stories. But this is going to be very different. This is just going to be more of me talking to you all based on as God gives me various topics. And then we'll also obviously have some news as well, because we want to have some news, because that's very important that we do know what's going on in the world as we're hearing things that's happening, that for us not to be ignorant of what's happening around us, so that we can be prepared. It's important for us to be prepared in all things, because we don't want to be caught slipping. Okay? We don't want to be caught slipping. We don't want to be caught not knowing things, because God always takes care of his people. He always takes care of his children. And he always gives us warnings and basically let us know what's happening before it happens. And so I do want to talk a little bit about that, but I want to talk about a few other things first. So one area that I want to talk about is a story that I read in regards to some of the first martyrs in the Christian faith, or for those who identified in the Christian faith. And so it's a story about Perpetua and Felicitas. And I don't know how many of you all are aware of that story, but it happened around 203 CE. And during that time period, there's a written piece from Perpetua, and it's a diary like page from her diary when she was in prison, and she was arrested basically because during that time it was law for you to sign over an agreement, have a certificate be done, and be witnessed that you have done your rituals. So you have done your rituals for that day or for that week to the pagan gods, the Roman pagan gods. During that time period, it was law. It's like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. We need to see your certificate, okay? Where's your certificate? It kind of reminds me of during COVID when they used to have the cards, identification cards, and it's like, did you get your COVID shot? We need to see the card. If you do not have the card, you cannot pass go. You cannot come up in here without the card. It kind of reminds me of that, which that's a whole nother story in itself, because many individuals did not go and get the COVID shot. So whether if you did or if you didn't, you're aware of what I'm talking about. So at a point in time, that was the case. Also, it was the case where a lot of individuals lost their jobs because of the law of the land. You had to specifically be vaccinated to work your job, to get the COVID-19 shot, to continue to work in your day of employment. A lot of nurses lost their jobs because they decided that they were not going to get the vaccination. And so during that time, you had to have these cards, even though you don't have to have them now, but you had to have them then at that time. And it was like, look, this is the law. Either you obey the law or you do not have access. You cannot pass go. And so that's what happened to her, except it was more stringent as far as the punishment, which usually was death or being tortured or worse, depending on your reasoning for not, quote unquote, not necessarily taking the shot, but your reasoning for not doing your rituals. So why didn't you do your rituals today? We saw 100 people tell us you didn't do them. And we're trying to find out what's going on. So she didn't do them. And she was asked, and she said, I'm Christian. And her father pled with her. Her family was pleading with her, like, look, you have a young child. You just gave birth to a young child. We need you to be around here. You need to think about your family. You need to think about your siblings, your sisters, your brother. You need to think about them with your decision when you can just do the ritual and come home. How many of us have been around people who want to tell us what's best for our lives? It's like, you can't tell me what's best for my life, because Holy Spirit has told me what's best for my life. I have prayed, I have fasted, I have done the things, the due diligence. I have a relationship with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So it's not something that I can get directly from you. I may hear what you're saying, but I have to take it back in prayer to determine if what you're saying is exactly what I need to listen to, right? And so it kind of happened with her. She was very strong-willed and focused in on her faith. You couldn't tell her anything. It's like, look, this is what it is. I am a Christian. I identify as being a Christian, so therefore I'm not doing any rituals. And she wasn't the only person. She had some additional friends with her as well. I think 2 other people were captured and also thrown in prison, and one of which was Felicitas, and she was actually pregnant during the time. And that was pretty interesting in itself. And I want to make sure that I have that right. But if it wasn't, I believe it was. And then what happened in that particular time period is that even during that pregnancy, everybody prayed during that pregnancy because they didn't want her in prison with her child and have to endure like this stringent, like this ridiculous punishment. They didn't want her to have to endure that. And so even with that, it was a situation that occurred where had this high risk pregnancy, and even in that being the case, after 8 months, that specific baby was not going to be born because everybody was like, well, look, the baby can't be born if it's going to be tortured. And so even in that, they wanted to make sure, like, what's the best thing that we should be doing? Because we want to make sure that we don't put anybody at risk, especially a child. It's one thing to put yourself at risk, but to put your unborn child at risk is crazy. And so they all prayed because they trusted God. And in the midst of it, she was able to give birth previously, like 8 months in, so that she wouldn't be in there with a child. So that was pretty deep too. So I thought that was an interesting perspective. And the thought of really just having God show up in a special way was pretty amazing, because even in that instance, even though everything was happening, still made sure that it wasn't a problem specifically with the child as well. Okay, so getting back to the story. So with Perpetua and Felicitas, some people say facility, when they were both in prison together, Felicitas had this situation where she was pregnant when she went in. So she was pregnant when she went in, and they were all facing this situation where they were saying, hey, we're Christians. We're not going to back down from saying that we're Christians. We're happy to be Christians. And we're here to sacrifice ourselves regardless of what is happening, whatever is going on, because we believe that God is going to protect us and keep us. And so, long story short, they wanted to make sure that, Perpetua wanted to make sure that her friend was not going to have her child killed along with her mother. And so she prayed, her and the believers prayed, and the woman was able to give birth 8 months in, and it was a painful birth. And they talked about how painful it was for this woman to give birth, but she did. And then after that, she was still going to be persecuted. So they were brought before the court to give one more opportunity to say, hey, are you going to go ahead and do the ritual, or what are you going to do? And Perpetua said, I'm a Christian. I'm not doing the ritual. I don't care to do the ritual. And it is what it is. So they knew that they were going to be tortured or worse, executed. So much so that they were specifically thinking about how they wanted to be executed. And it came down to them being ripped to shreds by animals. So what they would do during the Roman time period, I said around 200 CE, is that they would bring in the perpetrators, or the individuals that we're talking about, which are the Christians, and they would bring them in to slaughter them in front of an audience. And so they would come in and they would bring them there, and they would have different beasts that they would let out of their cages to come and tear them to shreds in front of this audience. And I know this is pretty interesting, but it's pretty graphic too. And so I do have to warn you. So they brought out Perpetua and Felicity, and the audience, they had them naked, the women, before they were going to get torn to shreds by an animal. And they actually had I said it was a cow, I believe. And before that happened, they literally saw the woman's stomach. So they saw that she had just given birth, and they felt that it was so gory, the audience, they couldn't bear it. And so they brought them out another time and put clothes on them, even though they were going to be slaughtered in front of them for sport. Isn't this sickening? All because they believed differently. So long story short, not only did Perpetua get executed, martyred, her friend as well, and another believer as well. And I believe he was killed by being bit by a leopard. And so it's very interesting to me because during this time period, no one complained in the writings. They were willing to sacrifice their lives for what they believed in, which is Jesus Christ of Nazareth, which is being a Christian, or for saying that they are a Christian and that they follow Christian beliefs. And they were killed for it. And many of the disciples, many of the most powerful men and women of God were executed and sacrificed their lives. And so it just made me think about dying daily. You know how you hear that so often? It was like, we should die daily. And people are like, well, what do you mean by dying daily? And it's like, well, your flesh, because where we are now, thank God for mercy. It's not a physical death, but it is in a way, because it's really spiritual, but it's also breaking down the mentality of things that you want, places that you want to go to, things that you want to do that may not be in alignment with God's will for your life. And so I'm staying on this because somebody needs to hear this word, that you need to be aligned with what it is that God has for your life. You need to seek him in prayer. You need to make sure you're going to church, okay? That you have a covering. I was talking to someone about this the other day, and they were like, yes, I hear from God all the time, et cetera, but they don't necessarily have a covering. And so you should have a covering as well, because it's important to have someone that's praying on your behalf, watching for your soul, praying on your behalf to God, and really just making sure that, it's like a companion with your prayers, right? And so just continuing to build those prayers and that strength of that. I think when you think about the disciples and the followers of Jesus Christ, they were followers of Jesus Christ. And they were people of the way, but they were disciples. They were powerful men and women of God that were assigned to specific groups, were assigned to correct specific groups within the faith, within the way. And so through that assignment, they were covering a lot of those individuals, a lot of those Christians, and they were, those Christians were able to have leadership on another level, to have someone to pray for them, to have someone to watch over their families. That is a huge responsibility. So for all our men and women of God, powerful men and women of God that are generals in the kingdom, we honor you, because the work that you're doing is difficult, but it is a work that you have chosen to do because God has graced you with that. And we just say thank you, because everyone can't do that. But it is important to have a covering. So I'm going to get off of that little train, okay? Because I'm just running on that train. But it's important. It's important to have that. So really, when I read this, it made me think about faithfulness. Like, oh my God, if that was today, how many of us would stand the test of time? How many of us would say the same thing? You being brought before the court and they're like, look, it's off with your head, or you're going to go ahead and do this ritual. Or does this sound a little bit more accurate as far as the time period that we're in? Oh, you want to buy goods? You want to sell? You're going to have to get this mark of the beast, or you're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to be able to eat. You're going to starve, and you're just not going to have anything. You're not going to be able to purchase anything because you don't have the mark, and you have to have the mark. Sorry. So it's up to you to decide on what you're going to do. And so at the end of the day, you have to make decisions, and it has to be the right decision for your life and for your walk with Christ. And so that's that. And so it really just made me think about a lot of different things, and to just say that all of us need to continue to build our walk. It's important for us to build our walk. And what does that look like for you? Everybody is different on what that looks like for them. And so I think it's very important for us all to focus in on what that is for our families and for our lives. Okay, so thinking about sacrifice, I did want to talk about a couple of additional things. So we do know, did you watch the debate, the presidential debate? I did. And so really curious about your thoughts. I like to tell everyone, just so they know, I am an independent. And I want to talk about this because I feel like a lot of individuals are extremely concerned about who's going to win the presidency, whether it's going to be Trump or whether it's going to be Vice President Kamala Harris. So the thing is it doesn't really matter who wins when it comes to the presidency. What does matter is what you're doing in your life and your relationship with Christ is going to sustain you regardless. That's what matters. So when I think about sacrifice, regardless of who gets into office, the policies and the procedures, whatever takes place, we need to be thinking about not what's going to happen to you, sacrificing different lifestyles, but thinking about what would happen if you were asked these same questions as Perpetua. What would you do? If that time comes where they say you gotta take the mark of the beast, what you gonna do? And I know it's easier said than being done. It's easier said like, oh, I'm definitely not doing that. Who? Why would I do that? That's wild. Until it happens to you. And so I think it's really important for us to be so girded up in our faith and to just continue to grow. I keep hearing that this is growing season. I'm feeling the growth, the growing pains, all the things. And I think it is. And I think that it's a good time for all of us to get ourselves in place and in alignment with what it is that we're supposed to be doing, because the work is great and it takes all of us to do this work. It's not just one person. It takes all of us to join together and to do this work. And so I did want to just share that story with you all because I thought it was interesting and it was something that I just recently read. And so I was like, let me share it. Something else that I did want to talk about before we end this segment is listening to the men and women of God when they speak. Listen. So talking about sacrifice and faithfulness and being a Christian and all the things that we've been talking about in this segment, I want to talk about hearing the word and hearing it from generals in the kingdom. So I've been blessed and fortunate enough to hear from my own covering, my Apostle Smith, and then also from just gifted men and women of God in the kingdom, Apostle Stallings. And also, I just recently have been really watching a lot of Apostle Joshua Giles. And really just listening to him has been pretty interesting in itself because he's been talking about times changing. And if I can find that video, I'm going to also post that link below. Feel free to tag the link so other people can view it. But he's been talking about the signs of the times and things that's about to take place within the next 6 to 7 months. Y'all, we got to be ready. Okay? READY, ready. And he was just talking about getting things prepared for your household. Any event that you're not able to just get in your car and drive down the street because of what's about to happen. And I think that people are like automatically be like, oh, it's doomsday, is doom and gloom, like everybody is talking about this. And it's like, no, it's really just trying to get us prepared. So if something does happen, that you have the tools necessary to sustain, right? So he talked about Apostle Giles talked about getting various items that you need for your household in the event that you don't have any power for days, don't have food stored up. So getting those items, taking the time to invest in getting batteries, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to leave that with you, that sacrifice can mean so much in a lot of different facets, in a lot of different ways. And so not only as Christians do we sacrifice our time, our energy, a lot of times our lives, and dying daily, specifically in our walk, okay? In our walk, in that instance, but also to ignorance. Like people say, like, ignorance is bliss. Like, no, it's not. It's ignorance. If you hear something that's happening, do your research, okay? As much as you possibly can. Look at the trends and see what's happening out here. And really just ask yourself, Was this something to warn me, or is this something that I should be concerned about? Just ask yourself the question, pray about it, and let the Holy Spirit guide you and lead and guide you into all truth by letting you know, hey, this is what you need to do. And so I think all of that has to do with having a strong prayer life. And also, when you hear these men and women of God speaking, listen, because they get their information from God. Holy Father, let your kingdom come. Let your will be done as it is on earth, okay? As it is in heaven. So listen, when you hear them speak, y'all better be listening, because I know I'll be listening. I'll be like, what? What'd you say? What else I need to do? You say I need to do what? Okay? Because I'll be listening. Because it's important. It's important. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to Abundant Life News. I'm so happy for you all being here. It's something a little different today. It was a little bit more of conversation, more storytelling about some situations that may have happened, and some situations that absolutely happened, so that we can just have a strong basis or a strong premise on what it is that we want to focus on for our lives, and to just kind of think of what's next for us. What's next for your walk? If this touched your heart and your spirit, then just make sure you in a good church home. That would be my first place, my first start to tell you, be in a good church home, okay? Find a place that's right for you and seek his face daily, whatever that looks like for you. It can be you waking up in the morning and just giving God praise, like, thank you, Lord, for this day. It can be you, when you first get in your vehicle, saying a prayer. Like, you go anywhere, you say a prayer, praying over your food, having that time set aside, and any other way that God places in your heart, right? Because the whole point is for our heart to be turned toward him, right? Men look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And so keep your heart, keep your mind stayed on him, and he will definitely bless you, keep you, and sustain you, okay? Be blessed, and I will see you all next time.